So over the last year, there's been one Christian doctrine that I've had a particular issue with, and that is love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, turn the other cheek when someone wrongs you, and basically be a doormat is how I see it. And on one hand, I can see on sort of like a personal level there being some value to that. Not completely. I think it's kind of a narcissist's handbook. They'll be like, but you just have to love me and pray for me, and you can't strike back at me because you have to love your enemies, you know. That kind of mentality just really paves the way for evil people to be able to run rampant and do whatever they want, and nobody can criticize or prosecute or anything like that. They just, you know, you just have to forgive them and move on. It's kept so many people in toxic marriages. It's kept so many people in abusive relationships. It's allowed for dictators to do awful, awful things. Now, even Russia is very much embedded with their branch of the Orthodox Church. And while I don't think they've used a specific verse, they're definitely using the Orthodox Church as a way to justify what they're doing. And, you know, God's on our side and all that. But I've just had to really think with this Russian invasion, with seeing what's happening to the people of Ukraine, to people that I know in Ukraine, seeing how they're suffering, what is going on. It's insane and unthinkable for me to be like, well, yeah, I love Putin. I'm going to pray for Putin. I'm going to love my enemies. I'm going to love the Russian soldiers. Absolutely not. It's unthinkable. And I honestly think it's a pretty evil doctrine to love your enemies, because it just puts them in a position of power and you in a very disadvantaged position. And you know, I can look at it from a very dispassionate, very cerebral kind of way and say, oh, that's wonderful. That would be absolutely fantastic if that's the world we live in. If, you know, we can love our enemies and then they become our friends, and that's just wonderful. But that is not the world we live in. There are just people who are evil bastards, and people who are never going to see our perspective. What they want is going to conflict with what we want, and they are going to try and use force to get what they want from us, or even worse, get what they want from people who can't defend themselves, who can't fight, or who don't necessarily have the means. I look again at Ukraine here. They are fighting, but if they didn't have the help of the West, if the West just said, hey, we need to just love our enemies, we just need to love the Russians and pray for them, and just pray for their change of heart, and just pray for their prosperity, and you know, all this stuff, I mean, Ukraine would have been destroyed, completely destroyed already. I mean, so much of it has been destroyed, but because of Western anti-air missiles, Western long-range artillery, Western tanks, Ukraine still exists. It's still able to fight and still able to hold on to its sovereignty. And it's just crazy to me that Christians would be like, but the Bible says, pray for those who persecute you, turn the other cheek. If, you know, someone wrongs you, just let them wrong you again. And, you know, again, on paper, it might sound like a beautiful spiritual thing, and maybe for an individual it is, but it absolutely breaks down really anytime there's any scale applied. You know, if you in your own personal life want to turn the other cheek when, you know, your boss is kind of an asshole or something, cool. But as soon as you see someone hurting somebody, you can't turn the other cheek. You can't turn the other cheek if you're seeing someone being assaulted. And I would hope that you would view anybody who assaults another human as your enemy, as your personal enemy. I certainly do. And if you don't, I would really check yourself at the door, because they should be your enemy. Anybody who hurts another person intentionally should be considered your enemy, because I think people should value human life. I think people should value people who value human life, and people should protect innocent people. And like, that should just be the basis of all morality. As an atheist, that's the basis of my morality, is I believe that we should protect people who can't protect themselves, that people should be allowed to live their own free lives, that people should not be oppressed. And what I see, again, specifically in Ukraine, because that's really what's on my brain, is a group of people who want to oppress another group of people, and therefore they are my enemy, and I will not ever love or support or think positive thoughts about Russia or Russians because of what they're doing. And just the idea that people could say, based on the Bible, that you just need to pray for your enemies, just pray for them, pray for those who persecute you. And you could argue that the Russians are persecuting the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians should not love and pray for and support the Russians, absolutely not. That's the kind of bull that dictators use to try and get their way. And I'd even argue that maybe potentially maybe those verses were added into the Bible or created by somebody who wanted power, wanted to control people, rather it was a few people or a nation or whatever it is. That's the kind of shit that can really be used to wield unlimited power. So I really find that one of the worst and most disturbing and offensive kinds of ideas that the Bible teaches, because it leads to pacifism. And interestingly enough, I'm not a pacifist anymore. So that's all I wanted to say in this video, guys. I will catch you very soon.